All right, hello Year 7s. Today's lesson is going over fractions, decimals and percentages and how to convert between each one of those. Our goal is to be able to connect fractions, decimals and percentages and perform conversions. Make sure you rate your effort and knowledge as well. For warm-up, so I'll get you to pause the video at this point. You have to pick any column and just work through those. They're really good questions to practice, being comfortable with multiplying and dividing with powers of 10. So make sure you give that a try. All right, for APK, so you would have all seen this diagram or something similar to this in the past where you're converting between fractions, decimals and percentages, and there's multiple steps there for you to see what you have to do when you're trying to convert from one to the other. So if you can just quickly write down a few sentences reminding yourself about some of these conversions and what you remember. So just pause the video at this point and quickly jot down a few points in your notebook before we go through all of the information over the next few slides. All right, to convert from fractions to decimals, basically you simply divide the numerator by the denominator. So if I've got 3 over 10 as a fraction, then I simply do 3 divided by 10 and that gives me 0.3. If I've got 3 over 25, for example, as my fraction, then I do 3 divided by 25 and that gives me 0.12. There are other ways to do it as well. So if I wanted to do this slightly differently, if I convert my denominator to a power of 10, so 10, 100 or 1,000. So in this case, I can easily convert it to 100. 25 times 4 gives me 100 and I have to do the same to the numerator. So what I get is 12 over 100 and we know that 12 over 100 is the same as 12 divided by 100, which gives me 0.12. So the answer stays the same regardless of which method you use, just pointing out that there's other ways of doing it as well in case you're used to doing it this way here. All right, to convert from decimals to fractions, so the first step is to write down the decimal. So here I've got 0.65. Write it down with a denominator of 1. We've all looked at this before. We know that if we have any number, if we want to write it as a fraction, we can just write it as over 1. So that's step 1. Step 2 is we want to multiply the numerator and the denominator by a power of 10. So we want to multiply it by 10 or 100 or 1,000, basically trying to get rid of this decimal point here. So we are multiplying by 100 here because there are 2 numbers after the decimal place, 1, 2. And so therefore we need to multiply by 100, which has 2 zeros, so that we can get rid of that decimal point. And so therefore we get 65 in our numerator because 0.65 times 100 is 65. And we know 1 times 100 is 100. So now we've converted our decimal to a fraction. And remember the final step, in order to get full marks, you always have to simplify your fraction. So in this case, 5 times 13 is 65 and 20 times 5 is 100. So basically we've done divide by 5 up and down to get our simplified fraction. So our final answer is 13 over 20. To convert fractions or decimals to percentages, really easy. And just keep in mind, fractions, literally teachers use it all the time to converting fractions to a percentage when we give you your marks. So teachers convert marks from a fraction to a percentage. Give that a try and see if you can work out what this is as a percentage and put it in your books. And basically, just so you know, percentage is a number or an amount expressed as a fraction out of 100. And we use this percentage symbol to show that it's a percentage. So when you're converting, the only thing to keep in mind is that you always, whether it's a decimal or a fraction that you're converting, you have to multiply by 100. So here I've got 3 over 10 as my fraction. I've times it by 100 and I get my numerator becomes 300. So remember I can put that as over 1. So 300 over 10 And if I simplify that, that's 30. In this case here, I've again multiplied by 100. So I move my decimal 2 places. So I get 62.5%. Going from percentage to a decimal. So what you want to do is rewrite your, instead of having this percentage symbol, we know percentage means out of 100. So you can either write it as that, or it's the same as 75 divided by 100. Remember, the fraction bar here is the same as this symbol here, division. So when you do 75 divided by 100, you get 0.75. So we've gone from percentage to a decimal. So you're simply dividing by 100. And percentage to a fraction, really simple. You write down 75%. We know percent means over 100. So 75 over 100. And the last step is to simplify. So to simplify, I know 25 is a common factor because 75 divided by 25 gives me 3 and 100 divided by 25 gives me 4. One more example, I've got 82 over 100. So if I simplified, 2 is a common factor. 82 divided by 2 is 41 and 100 divided by 2 is 50. And again, make sure you go on to Delta Learning to find the exercise. It should say lesson 2, fractions, decimals, and percentages, and do your goal review in your notebooks. Thank you.